tuning up in two. For those of you that saw the previous video, I talked about serving size and portion size and knowing the difference between the two. Serving size is what's on the nutrition label. Portion size is what you choose to put on your plate. But when you're meal planning, and let's say that you have specific amounts of carbohydrates or proteins that you're looking for, it's important to know and to compare apples to apples when you go to the grocery store. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on what I call a food exchange, or in this particular instance, a carbohydrate exchange. And the examples that we're going to use are the focaccia bread, the rice, and the English muffin. So we know that on an English muffin, let's say that if you're wanting roughly 18 grams of carbohydrates. So 18 grams of carbohydrates based on the serving size is a half of a muffin. So you can have half of an English muffin here, and it's going to be the equivalent of 18 grams of carbohydrates. Well, what about the rice or the focaccia bread? Well, in the rice, that you look on a quarter of a cup of rice, of dry rice, is equal to 35 grams of carbohydrates. So we don't need that. We need that roughly half of that to get that 18 grams of carbohydrates. So a quarter of a cup is roughly this size here. So what you're going to have to do is cut this in half. So half of a quarter of a cup, which again is an eighth of a cup of dry rice, makes or yields about a quarter of a cup of cooked rice. So if you were to want 18 grams of carbohydrates, you could have a half of an English muffin. You could have roughly a quarter of a cup cooked rice. And those would be the same. Or this focaccia bread here, that you look, and 37 grams of carbohydrates is roughly a third of this. So a third of it, if you break it into thirds, so this slice here is going to be about 37 grams of carbohydrates. Well, we don't need that. Essentially, we need half of that. So if you wanted 18 grams of carbohydrates from this focaccia bread, you're going to have to slice this into basically a sixth, which is this little slice here. So again, if you're wanting to compare apples to apples, look at the exchanging the foods or the quantities in all of the foods that you're eating. Half of an English muffin, a quarter of a cup cooked rice, or a sixth of a slice of the focaccia bread is equal to 18 grams of carbohydrates. So thanks for tuning in, tuning up in two.